2. Negotiate access. Foresight. Waquant signed up as member of the boxing club, and I found myself confronted with a triple challenge. The first part was, would I be capable of learning this roughest and most demanding of sports, of mastering its rudiments so as to carve out for myself a small place in the simultaneously fraternal and competitive world of the sweet science of bruising, to weave with the members of the gym relationships of mutual respect and trust, and thereby eventually carry out my field investigation of the ghetto? The second challenge was whether his immersion and participation in the gym would enable him to understand the ghetto in which it was located. We'll return to this shortly. And the third constituent of the challenge facing Waquant was how to give an ethnographic account of a practice that is essentially nonverbal. How to account anthropologically for a practice that is so intensely corporal, a culture that is thoroughly kinetic, a universe in which the most essential is transmitted, acquired, and deployed beneath language and consciousness. In short, for an institution made man or men situated at the extreme practical and theoretical edge of practice. In exploring these concerns, Waquant is reflecting on his access to the form of life of boxing. Access is not the same as entry. The traditional myth is that the ethnographer crosses a frontier, moral or metaphysical in Geertz's words, to enter the culture and be accepted as one of the natives. Lequant comes close at times to repeating this myth, but his reflections are generally more congruent with the new ontology of the ethnographic field, that it is dispersed, disputed, and dynamic, and that the ethnographer must continually negotiate access, using his or her identity as a principal resource. On the one hand, Waquant does write of his moral and sensual conversion, of being able to lodge myself durably in the milieu, and he celebrates how he was accepted as a fellow boxer. In the intoxication of immersion, I even thought for a while of aborting my academic career to turn pro, and thereby remain with my friends from the gym and its coach, Didi Armour, who had become a second father for me. He also notes that his access would have been greatly restricted if he had arrived with the identity of researcher. It was only after I had been inducted as a bona fide member of the inner circle of the boys' club that I decided, with the approval of those concerned, to make the craft of the boxer an object of study in its own right. There is no doubt that I would never have been able to gain the trust and to benefit from the collaboration of the Woodlawn regulars if I had joined the gym with the explicit and avowed aim of studying it, for that very intention would have irrevocably modified my status and role within the social and symbolic system under consideration. At the same time, Waquant makes it clear that he was never only a boxer. For one thing, he was white, while all the other members of the gym were African American. For another, he was French. Those characteristics made him obtrusive. He didn't fit the familiar categories of identity. He was aware that my French nationality granted me a sort of statutory exteriority with respect to the structure of relations of exploitation, contempt, misunderstanding, and mutual mistrust that oppose blacks and whites in America. Comments by other boxers made clear how he both fit in and stood out. Man, you be so relaxed. It's hair to tell you're Caucasian. It's hard, I guess. Man, you be so relaxed. It's hard to tell you're Caucasian. We got the fighting Frenchman on our team. He roars in obvious delight. Yep, you're part of the gym, like everybody else. In addition, Waquant's research became an aspect of his identity. For example, he was referred to at times as a teacher. At the end of Body and Soul, Didi points out one of the key distinctions between Lois and the other aspiring boxers at the club. "You got enough to write your damn book now. You don't need to get into the ring." LeCointe had put his body on the line, but Didi knew that boxing was neither his life nor his livelihood. 3. Get the ontology and the prepositions right. Foregrasp. It is important to reflect on your ontological assumptions about the form of life you plan to study. I'm referring here not to the ontology of the form of life, its cosmology, but assumptions about the field that you will be studying. If you have followed my advice, you have already started to avoid the traditional assumptions that a form of life has clear boundaries, which one would cross to enter it, or that it is static, or that it is homogeneous. LeCointe employed Bourdieu's concepts of habitus, social field, and the ontological complicity between the two, as well as illusio. Like Bourdieu, he sought to avoid or escape a series of dualisms. Centrally, he recommended that the fabrication of what one may call the pugilistic habitus amounts to a specific set of bodily and mental schemata that is founded on a twofold antinomy, that's in opposition, that of nature and culture, and that of the individual and the collective. At the same time, he proposed becoming a boxer transcends any distinction between the physical, the bodily, and the spiritual, the moral. As the title of his book indicates, LeCointe proposed that boxing is more than an occupation, it is a way of life to which the practitioner becomes dedicated, body and soul. In addition, LeCointe rejected assumptions often made about the character of African American communities. The normal sociology of the relations between class, caste, and state in the U.S. metropolis seemed to me riddled with false concepts that obscure the reality of the ghetto by projecting onto it the racial and racist common sense of the national society. In particular, he questioned the assumption that such a community is a disorganized universe, characterized by lack, want, and absence. LeCointe's study of the boxing life is an explicit example of research with an emancipatory interest. His publications aim to question and undercut the typical attitude towards boxing, that it is violence pure and simple. 4. Become entangled in the form of life. The fundamental insight or faith of ethnographic fieldwork is that an involvement, engagement, or entanglement in the ways of a form of life, in its cosmology, is a prerequisite for coming to understand it. This is not at all to suggest that the person is the instrument, as some qualitative researchers have proposed. On the contrary, it is to say that what you are searching for is a kind of understanding that instruments do not provide, a kind of learning that cuts so deep as to be a transformation of your very being. That's what learning is, isn't it? Or what learning should be. The core of LeCointe's ethnography in Body and Soul is the narrative of his training and education as a boxer, his entanglement in the world of the gym, indeed in the world of boxing. To understand the universe of boxing requires one to immerse oneself in it firsthand, to learn it and experience its constitutive moments from the inside. He emphasizes the duration, regularity, and intensity of this entanglement. For 3 years, I trained alongside local boxers, both amateur and professional, at the rate of 3 to 6 sessions a week, assiduously applying myself to every phase of their rigorous preparation, from shadow boxing in front of mirrors to sparring in the ring. Like Latour in Laboratory Life, LeCointe celebrates his initial lack of expertise and his status as a newcomer. He was at first the perfect novice, perfect presumably refers to qualifications that he considered ideal for an ethnographer. As a novice, he would be able to undergo, experience, and report upon the transition to expertise. Indeed, Waquant writes not only of his immersion in the world of boxing, but also of being seduced by it. Indeed, he declares, I'm already way beyond seduction. An excerpt from his field notes celebrates the pleasures of his entanglement. Today, I had such a ball being in the gym, talking and laughing with Dee Dee and Curtis, sitting in the back room and just living and breathing there among them, soaking up the atmosphere of the gym like a human sponge. I feel so much pleasure simply participating that observation becomes secondary. But there is also a strong theoretical and methodological logic to Waquan's involvement. As we have seen, his use of Bourdieu's concept of habitus implies that in the study of any kind of expertise, but especially in an occupation such as boxing, the goal has to be a practical grasp of what is at stake. He cites Bourdieu's The Logic of Practice to the effect that practical expertise follows a logic that unfolds directly in bodily gymnastics, and adds, without the intervention of discursive consciousness and reflective explication, so that the inculcation of the dispositions that make the boxer comes down to a process of Bildung of the body. Bildung is a German word meaning development. And where Bourdieu used the phrase participant objectification, Waquant prefers observant participation, which highlights the importance he attributes to participating actively and bodily. As we shall see in more detail later in this chapter, another way that Waquant emphasizes the corporality of becoming a boxer is through his choice of metaphors. He writes, for example, that a boxer is manufactured. Entering into the manufacture of the boxer by elucidating the coordination of these three elements, the body, the individual consciousness, and the collectivity that mold him and make him vibrate day to day, it is life itself. It is all of man that we discover, and that we discover inside ourselves. Here, Waquant is making several important points. First, that the ethnographer has to participate personally in the practice, the praxis of becoming a boxer. Second, that a boxer is constituted of three elements: the corporal, the individual, and the collective. There is a dialogue here with Marcel Mauss, who, as we have seen, explored a sociology of techniques of the body. The point of which is that, third, this constitution is life itself, all of man. When we study boxers, we are investigating one way to be human, one coordination of human being. We are, in this respect, studying ourselves, and what we learn, we can also then discover in ourselves. This investigation, this kind of investigation, is indeed an ontology of ourselves. A second aspect of the conduct of ethnography that Waquant emphasizes is that, in contrast to sensationalist journalism and social science, the ethnographer should focus on what is everyday and quotidian. Fieldwork must instead grasp boxing through its least known and least spectacular side, the drab and obsessive routine of the gym workout. Accordingly, Waquant describes in detail the daily activity in the gym. This consists principally not of fighting, but of training of floor work and table work, punctuated by road work, physical exercises including shadowboxing in front of a mirror and working at a punching bag, and running 18 to 30 miles a week. This is, in time, followed by sparring with a partner, wearing protective headgear and heavily padded gloves. Waquant recounts in detail his experiences participating in each of these constituents of everyday activity in the gym.